stipulation that it can only be used for water, no matter who purchases it? That it cannot be for any type of chemical,
That would
gasoline?
make sense, yeah. See why not?
Sure.
Is that, Sean, does that make you a little bit more at ease with it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just when somebody's selling one of these things, they just have to disclose it, and the nature of tank, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Okay.
Well, I'm sure if we could, I'm sorry.
You said, do we want to go through the recommendations from the planning commission?
Yeah,
Sure,
that's a good
I
I
think
idea.
think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So the first was storage and maintenance of chemicals only in accordance with OSHA and applicable EPA, DEP standards and notifications of fire company of location of chemical storage and chemicals being stored. It's a tiny bit redundant, but the concept is there. And I believe that was the testimony of the applicant and the applicant's witnesses, that they have essentially limited chemicals, but those that they do are regulated both by OSHA and DEP, and they will be compliant. So it seems like a reasonable condition. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Sure.
The second one says applicant to test. I'm just trying to decide if this needs to be on the record or not. This is sort of part of the
You don't want to know?
deliberation.
Okay,
No.
well, you can tell me off the record, so. we
I'm
don't-
sorry.
It's okay. Well, yeah,
Should I give you a break?
better safe than sorry.
A second bullet point, applicant to test all surrounding wells to establish a baseline of water quality before the development begins. In parentheses, it says PC discussed, the planning commission discussed the possibility of regular monitoring of surrounding wells, but did not recommend that. So, I mean, the notion of a baseline test is a good idea. There was testimony that they're willing to do that. That seems reasonable. It seems to be requiring any other monitoring wouldn't be necessary unless or until there's a problem. But having established a baseline would be helpful then in determining what was the source of any problem in the future. So I would just strike what's in the parentheses there. Third one, provide a 10-foot easement for possible future trail connection along frontage of property with alignment flexibility to avoid vegetation. Again, in parentheses, the planning commission did not think it made sense to build a trail or sidewalk to nowhere at this time. Consideration should be made to a fee in lieu of sidewalk or trail construction, or have the applicant build it now for future extension. The PC was supportive of a macadam trail rather than a concrete sidewalk. So I believe the testimony was they were prepared to provide an easement for it in the future. I guess I'll leave it to you folks. I mean, Tracy might be in the best position to know, if there'll ever be a county or other trail that may go along that road.
So part of this is, there are plans in the county comprehensive plan and in the township comprehensive plan to ultimately have a connection from like Wayland Park area and down to Swamp Creek, all the way up to Green Lane. I think it's called the West County Trail. And they do have it in this area along the frontage of this property. It's not a high priority at the county at this point, but it was important that we at least brought it up in the conversation so that at a minimum we get an easement. It's always tricky whether or not you have a development build a segment of trail, because it doesn't go anywhere, but on the flip side, if somebody's walking along the road, it gives them a chance to get off the road for a segment of length. So, and the way the code is written, I think currently, if they were to follow the letter of the code, and Norm can speak to this, they would install a concrete sidewalk. But because of this trail plan at the county, and then here, the suggestion is, rather than a concrete sidewalk, an asphalt, multi-use path would be the more appropriate option along the frontage of the property.
So I guess there's two issues built in there. I mean, they said they're willing to give the easement, but I think it should still be a condition of sense, where their teeth would be, so provide the 10-foot wide easement.
Right.
And the second is just whether they would require them to construct it now or not. And maybe it's a third question,
If
do
not,
they can fund it.
yeah, do you want
now.
them to provide some funding that gets put aside for when it's time to build it?
Well, when the county's putting in these trails, who's usually
Well,
paying to put them in?
it depends. I mean, if the township decides it's important for the community, we could always put a segment of the trail in. Or we can have developers do their share of it, and eventually you start to get larger segments sooner than the county might ever get around to it. So those are some options. So the applicant later in their land development application is asking for a waiver from the construction of the sidewalk at this point. So that's something that you'll have to consider as part of their waiver request.
But still have a 10-foot easement.
But yeah,
You still have
we
10
still
foot
want the 10-foot easement, correct?
Right, okay.
With flexibility, so, rather than necessarily just an absolute straight 10-foot easement, they're gonna be planting vegetation along the frontage, so it may be that it needs to, work around the vegetation, because you certainly don't want it to be installed later and have to, clear out required vegetation.
So it sounds like we just not pursue the business in parentheses.
Correct, I'm fine with
Moving
that.
forward, next, all site disturbance of stormwater management facilities to be constructed and installed as part of phase one of the development. So, all site disturbance stormwater management to be constructed, installed.
So the idea with this is there was concern from the neighbors that the site work on this project would go on for years. And so the discussion of the planning commission was it would make sense to require them to do all their stormwater management, all their site disturbance, and get it done and in place. And as they testified, then later, as they want to build buildings, they'd have the pad sites ready and they would just install the buildings instead of tearing up another part of the site. This also gets to the concern regarding the stormwater management. This would require them to build all their stormwater management in the beginning so that there's not an issue with that later.
So I would only add maybe a word where it says all site disturbance, maybe make a comment there and add roads and stormwater management facilities. So those be big things, right? If we add roads to this list.
I guess if you want to, I mean, that's site disturbance.
That was there, right, just for clarification, and they said they would do that. All right, next bullet point, design the stormwater system to hold back extra stormwater during large rain events to help the neighbors and clean out the pipe under Perkins Road and clean out existing swales in the area to help with current problems.
So again, these were some concerns raised by the neighbors. Norm, did you indicate that they did have they added some additional capacity for stormwater?
I was suggesting that they do, and the phrase that I like is to the satisfaction of the township. The reason I say that is there's a number of different things that come into effect when you talk about stormwater. If, for example, what you have there under Perkins Road with that pipe is what's called a point of interest, which is where the stormwater leaves the site. Okay, so when you go and add pipes and change the time of concentration or the flow path to that point, you extend the impact at that point. So what could wind up happening with the gentleman in the back who was concerned about stormwater is the flow along Perkins Road that's off-site could wind up working its way through before the worst of the basin, the routing of the basin, which is a positive thing. Not only does the stormwater peaks from pre to post get detained, which is required by the ordinance, but if the impacts of the storms are actually misaligned, then the impact is further reduced that would be perceived by a downstream resident. That's why I say to the satisfaction of the township, because we can't necessarily say 10%, you can't say something like that. If the applicant would agree to do reasonable measures to try to further reduce the impact of a known problem area, I don't think it's going to be anything that we would be asking that would be unreasonable. And just, if I could, just to expand on that, one of the things that we've done that actually can wind up, especially with something as broad and flat and shallow as this, is we have freeboard requirements in the ordinance that are generally, you've got to write an ordinance for every situation other items that we have going on in the township. Well, what we could very easily do is simply raise the spillway elevation. It increases the volume of the basin dramatically and really changes their design very little. Okay, so we decrease the freeboard and you increase the volume inside the basin substantially. So, and that's something that I could discuss with Mr. Rosella.
Which way, Norm, is more environmentally correct and also doesn't hinder the, Mr. Schwager, was it? Slavin, his residence down there with the runoff in the future?
No, that was the whole point, it would be a positive effect for Mr. Slavin. I'm sorry if I didn't cut your name right. But that would be the entire point, is that the more time you take for that storm to get to the cross pipe, very likely the more chance you have of the flow happening on Perkionville Road, that swale actually starting to drain down before the impacts of this site would be at their peak.
Okay, I think I understand how you can draft that. The next one says install emergency access from Perkionville Road with a, and I would add the word width, so we read with a width and a turning radius that is acceptable to the township fire marshal. Probably change acceptable to satisfactory.
Ken, if I could, just real quick, I heard a couple of people comment on there about possibly wider. What Mr. Rosella had indicated, they have auto turn. What I would recommend is that there's communication between the applicant and the fire company to indicate what is the largest apparatus that might need to use that vehicle. Auto turn can pick everything from a WB 64 down to a single UPS truck. You pick something that will mimic that, that'll set your width, it might impact your aprons coming in, it might impact your radius, but it'll be something right there on the plans, the same technique that was used to get your 18-wheelers in and backed into their facility could go right on the same plan and show, hey, the fire company said this is the vehicle, this is the largest that they would have, and we can show that you can make access off of Perkionville Road with that particular vehicle.
Norman, with your experience, you think that will not offset the architect's design that much?
No, I don't think it will. No, I think he might need to widen a little bit here, we might need to put some aprons on there, but I'm confident that it would not have a dramatic impact. It's already 12 feet wide, right? Yeah, so maybe if you go to 15 feet, or it might, 12 feet is very likely in a straight section, fine.
Okay.
The way I see it, coming off of Perkionville Road, you might need to increase radiuses, and you might need to go from 12 feet to, 15 or 16 feet around the curve, and then back down to 12 where it enters the park. I mean, I don't think they have a 70-foot long ladder truck, right? I mean, it's smaller, right, as far as the fire company goes.
Tanker trucks are very long.
Okay. No, what do they have? Do they have ladder trucks?
Frederick?
Upper Fred, yeah.
No, but they're not the only fire company that responds into this township.
Okay.
Multiple
Okay.
townships.
We'd still take that direction from Upper Fred as far as who would respond and what it should be designed for, but yeah, we should be able to accomplish that.
Next one is sprinklers in the new buildings, which I think they've stipulated already or testified they would do. And the last bullet point is provide landscaping as recommended by the township plan. Members of the board have any additional conditions they would consider necessary or advisable?
No,
No? All right.
I do not.
If there's not anything further, then I mean, that would be an opportunity for someone to make a motion to either approve or deny the conditional use request. Approved, thus subject to these conditions. Are you interested in moving forward?
I'm not, I will wait. I just want more time to review this.
That's fine. 45 days to render a decision. And it needs to be done at a public meeting.
Okay.
When is the next meeting, and do you want to schedule it for then?
September 14th, continue to that meeting.
Yes. Okay, for the record, the board has deliberated a number of aspects about the testimony, and then in particular with regard to the conditions, and have made a decision now that they want to ponder this some more before they render a decision. The matter will therefore be, this matter will be recessed and reconvened at 7 p.m. on September 14th here in the Township Building. And that concludes this matter.
Okay.
All right. Tracy, again, we don't have any track record or experience doing this. Does the court wish to get a copy of the transcript? I think in this case, probably.
I don't know that we need a transcript unless somebody wants to hear it.
Okay.
You guys okay with that? Do you need a transcript from this meeting?
From this one,
It may help you in your, I mean, you're allowed to, although I don't know that you'll necessarily get it within 30 days or much before the next.
I do have a question after the fact, the build time on this, what do you think the build time is, start to finish?
Testified that it, okay.
With the discussed, it was discussed right here to possibly go over through the course of 3 years.
Thank you.
Stenographer indicates that it would take 2 to 3 weeks to get the transcript. Do you think it would be useful or necessary for you to have that transcript in order to, review the testimony tonight before you render a decision? Or,
I think 2 to 3 weeks is acceptable.
all right, so let's authorize stenographer to prepare the transcript as
For the minutes, we only have July 13th, July 6th. We can say.
Was Ron at first July 13th?
If you do, let me know ASAP.
We don't cancel.
Oh, no, we're not.
Here we go. Ready for something from my office cover, yeah, baby. All right, have a good night, thank you. Okay,
Well, there's another, we're on the agenda
for the plan itself?
Right,
Okay.
All right.
itself.
Move that up
All
or
right, so-
just skip to your agenda?
What, which part?
The
Oh,
land development application.
yeah, we can skip that. So we're gonna move down to our new business, preliminary land development application for 3 BoS. So. Sorry,
So, I guess, Ken, if you have any suggestions, I mean, since you chose not to make a recommendation on the conditional use tonight,
right.
you could certainly hold off on this. You could ask for a summary from Norm of his comments from an engineering standpoint, maybe at least tonight.
Yeah.
Did you want to do another presentation, or what do you?
Well, obviously, I don't need to do a full presentation, but the only thing I do want to say is that, we have the HAL review letter from, the LTL review letter from August 4th. Everything's a will comply, except for items that we've asked for waivers on. Those waivers were reviewed and recommended at the planning commission meeting last month. We've submitted a revised waiver letter with just 2 additional points from the ones that were already discussed by the planning commission. And I can ask Joe to kind of detail what the additional waivers that we've asked for since last month.
The additional waivers that we're pursuing is a result from the latest review letter from the township engineer. The first one we identified is the minimum paving width for township roads within the township, and whereby there's an existing paving width on the state road, which is Perkins Road, that is 20 feet wide. Our response to that is the applicant is requesting a waiver from this section of the ordinance whereby the existing road may be considered a residential road that would require a paving width of 22 feet. Perkins Road is a section of PennDOT State Road that runs between Big Road and Deep Creek Road. The properties along the section of this road are mostly farm and residential, and given the nature of these uses, the road could be considered as rural, where the paving width would be 18 feet. The current cartway width is 20 feet and accommodates the existing residential traffic. Since no other improvements are being considered as part of this project, except for emergency services driveway, we believe the existing cartway width is adequate. That was our first waiver. The next waiver that we would be pursuing in addition to the other one is what we have identified as number 8. And that is trees shall be planted a minimum 6 feet from underground utilities. Our explanation to pursuing the waiver is that the applicant is proposing a site layout that is reflective of farm-type buildings, structures, and pavement. The arrangement of these features in conjunction with all the required underground utility creates condition where separation between landscaping and underground utilities are less than 6 feet. Due to the scale of the conditions, a waiver is being pursued, is being requested to be less than the 6 feet that is required. And then finally, the next waiver again, along the lines of landscaping, is to ensure that no trees are planted on or within 30 feet of an impoundment structure or dam, and that's referring to the stormwater system. Our explanation to pursue this waiver is that the applicant is proposing a shallow detention basin spread out along the eastern side of the property adjacent to Perkins Road. The shallow basin is intended to resemble a rain garden to present gentle appearance to provide stormwater management. Due to the scale of the project, the layout positioning the landscape material within 30 feet setback area provides a more naturalistic landscape design. The reduced setback based upon the shallow depth of the